Katanga has just celebrated 2 years of independence. 2 years ago, when the Belgians handed over the Congo, Katanga, the richest of the 6 provinces, declared itself to be an independent state. Since then, much effort and money and many lives have been spent in trying to bring Katanga and its wealth back into the Congo. Now the Congo problem is again occupying the United Nations, and the problem of Katanga is still unsolved.
Elizabethville, capital of Katanga, still shows evidence of the bitter fighting last September and December between United Nations troops and the Katangese. No one bothers to clear up the rubble when fighting might start again almost any day. If the United Nations tried to move troops into Elizabethville or use economic sanctions against Katanga, there could be a repetition of last year's events when fighting broke out twice. UN planes bombed installations. Katanga said it was a campaign of coercion. The UN described it as a defense of their personnel. According to Katanga, ambulances were shot at by UN troops. According to the UN, Red Cross facilities were used as camouflage by Katanga guerrillas. This battle of counter-accusation extended even to the graves. The Katangese claimed 1,000 killed in September alone, but the UN has always denied this. During the truce, the cemeteries have been marked, and in some ways life came back to normal. Outside Elizabethville, you can still get a game of golf on the old Belgian-built course. But as you play, not far away are some of the UN defense positions forming a ring round the town. Elizabethville's airport is held by UN troops. 3 days ago, they closed it on the orders of the Central Congolese government, making it difficult for President Tshombe, who'd gone to Geneva for a health checkup, to get back to his capital. Indian troops man most of the roadblocks that seal off the routes into Elizabethville. They surround the town, and they themselves are surrounded by the Katanga army positioned in the country outside. The streets of Elizabethville look almost normal. There are no UN troops stationed here, and the Katanga government has nothing but a few police in the town. But last month, when President Tshombe celebrated his 2nd year of independence, there was an ugly flare-up. UN had given him permission to bring in 300 troops. Instead, Tshombe brought in with his supporters 2,000 troops to accompany his triumphal progress. The UN's retaliation was to seal off the only road. Indian troops were then mobbed by thousands of Tshombe's women supporters and forced to fire. The Katangese claimed scores were killed. The UN said 3. This incident is typical of the existing tension, which can at any moment lead to an explosion.
The United Nations at the moment have a mandate to get rid of the mercenaries in Katanga, these soldiers of fortune who come here to fight with and to train the Katangese troops. There's been a lot of speculation about these mercenaries, where they come from, how many there are, and so on. And I went to a place some distance from Elizabethville and spoke to 2 of them.
Well, gentlemen, we're filming this with the back of your head to the camera because you don't want to be recognized. Why did you come to fight for Katanga?
Well, originally I came for the reason that, number one, it gave me a chance to get back into flying, which I'd been out of for some years, and I must not also forget, to be honest, that the pay was very good. But originally, when we came to fight for Katanga, there was no actual question of fighting, as we know the fighting that took place in September or December. And after being here for a while, one becomes imbued with a spirit for which Katanga stands.
You believe in what you're doing, in fact?
Very sincerely, very, very sincerely today.
If there's more fighting here, will you fly again?
Certainly. That's what we're here for, and that's what we believe in today. Although there is no fighting today, we are doing the normal civilian flying as pertains to ordinary everyday flying, etc. But should the necessity arise again, I, for one, I'm sure my colleagues would join in to help Katanga.
The figure of 200 mercenaries is often quoted. There are 200 mercenaries still in Katanga. Would you say that was the case?
No, I would say that was a figment of somebody's imagination.
How many do you think there are, in fact?
Today?
Yes.
If there were a dozen, that would be about as many as there were.
What did you do in the fighting last year?
I started, I was in December and September. In December, for the first 2 days, I was on the ground, unarmed, helping the legitimate army to organize itself a little bit. And an aircraft came to my disposal at the night of the second day, and I used that aircraft for military purposes.
And if there's more fighting here, would you fly again?
Certainly. We're flying all the time. The United Nations is perfectly aware of what we're doing at the moment. We hope that they're aware of what we're prepared to do if they make any rash moves in the future.
Do you think you've got a chance against United Nations jets?
We always have a chance against United Nations jets. These aircraft are far too fast for fighting in Africa.
Do you believe in what you're doing here?
100%.
Your friend said a few moments ago that he reckoned there were about 12 mercenaries in Katanga at the moment, in the sense of people who'd come in from outside to fight. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't. There are probably in the region of 300 mercenaries in this country who've come in to fight. This is long ago. The number actually in uniform, fulfilling a role of mercenary, could be quite few, because these 300 have been absorbed, as we are all absorbed, into the natives of this small land.
What do you think of the Katangese forces that you fought with?
They're surprising, but their achievements are quite out of proportion of the reputation which they had.
Katanga's army looks surprisingly like the UN as it trains underwhite officers. Amongst this group, some recruits are British subjects, Africans from northern Rhodesia. As confirmation of this, one was persuaded to write a letter which was then delivered to the recruit's family in Rhodesia. There are believed to be 600 Rhodesians with Tshombe's army. Trained in modern techniques and outnumbering their opponents 2 to 1, Tshombe's army hopes to harass the UN into an untenable position. Waiting for them grimly dug in along the hillsides, the UN themselves are awaiting a new policy decision from the Secretary General. When Bosanquet visited this position, it was held by Gurkhas, Nepalese serving with the Indian Army. These two won BCs fighting for Britain in Burma. The new UN commander is the Indian General Prem Chand. He commands 6,000 Irish, Indian, Tunisian and Ethiopian soldiers. But he himself first trained with British officers in the Sandhurst tradition. The UN commands say they've got sufficient men to enforce any mandate they may be given, but the Congo operation is threatening to bankrupt them. They've already imposed order on Elizabethville and cleared up one of its problems by repatriating most of the Baluba refugees. These Balubas were originally brought to Katanga by the Belgian colonial administration to work for their government. But as fighting started, they fled for protection to the United Nations. Weighing their belongings is the last batch of refugees to be flown back to their homeland in Kasai. The UN claim they've moved 65,000 altogether. Some of the Balubas are said to have enjoyed the aeroplane trip so much they came back for another ride. and many others are likely to filter back before the end of the year to the homes and property they've been forced to leave. Here are thousands of Baluba bicycles that form a sort of monument to this mass migration of a race of clerks and petty officials. The shanty houses of the refugees being pulled down by UN troops were built on the site that was once Elizabethville's beautiful botanical garden. It took the Belgians 40 years to cultivate. As the settlement burns, it expresses the UN's hope that by clearing up part of the situation, they are one step nearer to peace and Katanga's submission to the central Congolese government. But it's still only a hope, when back in Elizabethville, the Katangese and the white settlers are united behind an opposing policy.
The only, how should I put it? The only way to settle difficulties here is a federal state. You should realize that from here to Leopoldville is between about 1,700, maybe 2,000 miles from the road. So in Europe, for instance, it's from Marseille to Moscow. So how do you expect to make one country of that? And then the differences in languages. From here to Leopoldville, well, you can find maybe 20, maybe 25 different dialects.
This is easy for you to say in Katanga, but Katanga has all the money, and the rest of the Congo, we know, can't run without Katangan money.
We have always been prepared to share our wealth with the rest of the Congo. And even now, always, I'm not a politician, I feel pretty sure that our ministers, I mean our government, is still nowadays prepared to share our wealth with the other parts of the Congo.
The wealth they would share largely comes from these copper mines owned by a Belgian company, the Union Minière. Royalties from the mines form most of Tshombe's budget and are the foundation of his independence. If the UN could divert the royalties to the central Congo government, they would control Tshombe and solve part of the Congo's economic difficulties. From the mines at Kolwezi, the copper ore is transported to the Union Minière's plants by 300 miles of railway served by 1,000 miles of electric cable. If either the United Nations or Tshombe seized the copper revenue by force, the other side could immobilize the Union Minière by cutting the lines. While much of the rest of the Congo has been in chaos, the company's trains, mines and installations have kept running almost uninterrupted. These installations of the Union Minière company produce 7% of the world's copper, which equals the surplus on the world market. Here again, there's accusation and counter-accusation. The company firmly believes that American interests are trying to use the UN to stop their plants working. Some members of the UN believe that British financial interests in the Union Minière have led to British half-heartedness in support of the UN in Katanga. Roughly 300,000 tons of copper are trucked abroad every year to pour more than 15 million pounds of annual foreign revenue into Katanga's banks. This is the basis of the independent Katanga state with its own currency and stamps. And a few days ago, it was reported that the Union Minière was offering to pay as soon as the copper leaves Katanga. This should strengthen Tshombe's foreign reserves by another 20 million if he remains independent. Since Katanga started flying its own flag, Tshombe's government has functioned almost normally in contrast with the rest of the Congo. At the presidential palace, with a French interpreter, Reginald Bosanquet talked to Tshombe about the future of Katanga. The president and his politics are now the pivot of all negotiations in the Congo.
If you were offered the post of Prime Minister of the Congo, would you accept it?
This means nothing in the provisional constitution which has been imposed on us by the Belgians. What we need is a good constitution that reflects the realities of the Congolese situation. When this happens, I'll be able to answer the question.
If the United Nations Security Council tries to pass a strong resolution for another mandate in the Congo involving perhaps the use of force in Katanga, do you think that Great Britain will veto it?
Là, je n'en sais rien, mais seulement je préviens les conseils de sécurité.
That I don't know, but I simply warn the Security Council that a third aggressive action against Katanga will in no way resolve the problem. On the contrary, it will make matters worse because since the hostilities in September and December, nationalism in Katanga has grown stronger.
There seems to exist in Katanga at the moment a sort of armed truce between the United Nations and the Katangese forces. What do you think will happen next?
Nous n'avons jamais attaqué, nous n'attaquerons jamais. Mais seulement si nous faisons l'objet...
We have never attacked, we will never attack. We will only defend ourselves. Naturally, against brutal aggression such as we experienced last September and December, we would defend ourselves.
Au mois de juillet, nous nous défendrons.
Will there be more fighting here, do you think?
Nous faisons tout pour éviter le combat parce que nous ne sommes pas...
We are doing everything to avoid fighting because we are not an aggressive people. We are against war, and as I said, we've resisted aggressive action by the United Nations forces. If they attack again, we will defend ourselves. The UN, too, are ready. These are the troops of the crack Indian Brigade under the UN command at their camp outside Elizabethville.
It is impossible, in my view, for the United Nations to force Katanga to rejoin the Congo without special conditions. Even if the UN has the military strength to do this, the Katangese or the Belgians could blow up the dams in the last resort, which provide the country's power and render Katanga useless to everybody. President Tshombe would like to remain independent, but he has proposed a federal constitution, which would still give Katanga considerable say in her own affairs and allow her to keep more of her wealth than she did in the past. A compromise with the central government on both sides along these lines does seem to be the only answer. At least that's how it looks from here, and meanwhile time is on Tshombe's side. Good night.